So for this one, we're working on this multiplicative rule. And there's a lot of setup here, so we need to be a little bit careful with just kind of orienting to the spreadsheet. So this one is going to say whether it's a positive or negative result. And what we need to do is figure out for this drug user piece, we're setting our values to be whether there are a positive result if you are a drug user and a negative result. So this would be a false negative. This would be a false positive. So you're not a drug user, but you get that result. And then we have the ability to set these values to whatever we want. We just need that they have to add up to 1. They don't have to be the same across, but they just need to add up to 1. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say equals if this number is less than this, you're in that range of drug user. So we're going to say yes. Oops, didn't finish that. Yes. Otherwise, it's a no. So if you're in that range where it's above it, then you're in the range that we're saying is not a drug user. And so we're going to autofill that through. And so we can see here this person, right? They have that probability that's less than there. They would be a drug user. And then what we need to do is we also have our test result. This is just a random number. So that's automatically generated. What's going to happen here is it's going to give you whether that's a positive or negative result. And so what happens is it will ask the question if they are a drug user, and if the test result, so that random test result is less than this value, so we're looking at a non-drug user, if it's less than that, it is a positive. Otherwise, it's a negative. So you can see that this one is not less than 0.05. And so that one would be a negative result, and we can see there that that's a negative. Now this one we actually get a positive value here, a positive reading, even though they're not a drug user, because their test result is within, it's less than this value here. So that would be our false positive value. This one down here, we got they are a drug user, right? So we got that part there where they're a drug user. Their test result is 0.5. And so that is in this range. So they would get a positive. So that is a true result, a true positive. All right. So what we want to do now is it's set up. We're getting positives and negatives. We can change this value here to see that it's adjusting. We want to start to count what we have in terms of false positives and false negatives. And so for our false positives, we're going to write the formula as they have it. So it says equals if, and if this is a no, so if that equals no, we want to then ask the question if the result is positive, then that is a false positive. That's a 1. Otherwise, it's a 0. And then this is the other else. If it's not no, right, then it's a 0. We don't count. We don't worry about that being a false positive. It's not if they're not a drug user. Right? All right. So let me see if I can find a false positive to see if that's working. I'm going to auto apply that. Do we have a false positive? So that should be a no and then a yes. Oops, I do have that wrong. So this does need to be D2. Let me apply that all the way down. All right. So let me look at it now. I'm looking for a no and then a yes. So a no and a yes. So right here I get one false positive. That's a false positive. Here's another false positive. And so we're going to do our false negatives. All right. Our false negatives are going to be very similar, but we're going to say equals if this is a yes, so they are a drug user. Be careful with your capitalization. We ask the question if the result is negative. So they didn't get a positive result when they should have. That's a 1. Otherwise, it's a 0, comma, 0 if that's not true. And then we fill that in and we see. So this is looking for a yes here and then a no there. So a yes and then a no. Did we get any? Yes and a no. And we can see that we captured that with our false. So that's a false negative. All right. So once we have that, we can use our values here to complete that code to get all of those answers. So if I want to get my my true positives, right? My true negatives, my false positive, my false negatives. So my true negatives equals basically equals count if, and my true negative is here. That's a 1. So I have 74 true negatives. My false positives equals count if, false positives, 1. And then false negatives equals count if here is a 1. All right, so I got 2 false negatives, 2 false positives. I got 14 true negatives, and I got 14 true positives, 81 true negatives. Here, where we're looking at our true positives. So my true negatives, if I put in that value, equals my true negatives divided by the count in there. And then my false positives equals this divided by count of that. And this equals my false negatives divided by the count of that. All right. So we have it all set up. Let me just check real quick. Equals sum of all those, and that should be 100% because those are all the possibilities. All right, well, what happens is we start to change our values, right? So we could change, let's say that we really are not okay with the false negatives being that rate, right? Maybe we want it to be 0.01, right? What does that do? So now I don't have any false negatives, right? But I have, what happened to my true pod is, let me put 0.1 back, all right? So I can see my true negatives are adjusting. My false positive rate, if I'm worried about false positives, a false positive would be a real problem for a person. And let's say that that was 0.1, right? What happens to our true negatives, our false positives, our false negatives, as we start to adjust what these pieces look like? So now you have a tool where you can start to do some analysis looking